Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Back to Watercolors. I wanted to feature some of my handmade watercolors and share how they can be a great companion to any watercolor or gouache piece that you are working on. The watercolor set that I'll be using for this painting is my Zoran Paint Limited color palette that features 3 colors in the spirit of trying to have a Zoran palette but also give a nod to the historical paint gray color. While mixing those 3 colors together, you get almost close to the historic paint gray color. The 3 colors in this palette are dark yellow ochre, cinnabar, and my custom color marine. I like having a mix of single pigment colors and custom mixes in my handmade watercolor sets because I like to mix my colors and see what kind of granulation I will get. Primarily try to focus on custom mixes, but occasionally I will also throw in some single pigments. This palette benefits from having single pigments because it acts as a primary set for someone who is interested in exploring this historical color mix. When I first start a piece of artwork, or if I'm interested in certain color mixes, I like to do a very small watercolor swatch to see what kind of color mixes I can produce. I don't try to be very methodical about it. I do tend to like to surprise myself with the color mixes that I can produce while painting. But for the purpose of this video, I did want to share a little bit of the colors that you can expect to see from this watercolor palette by just mixing the 3 primaries together. I also have more pictures up on my Etsy if you're interested in checking out this palette. I feel like any set of handmade watercolors can act as a great companion to any painting that you want to use your professional grade paints with in your sketchbook. I find that I use a lot of my handmade watercolors most of the time as underpaintings, or sometimes if I want a bit of granulation in the hair or in the background, I'll reach for my handmade watercolors because they're very good at granulation. I find handmade watercolors to be very saturated as well, and I think that is due to the nature of how the pigments are made. For me, I don't use anything like honey, or I don't use any essential oils in my watercolors. I use vegetable glycerin as part of my binder mix, and that's because I don't want my watercolors to feel like a barrier to entry for anyone, and so I don't use honey because that can act as a barrier to entry. I also don't use essential oils because that can act as a barrier to entry to anyone who is sensitive or allergic to certain essential oils. I have found a lot of joy in using handmade watercolors, and that's what brought me to making my own set of handmade watercolors. And I'm hoping that my watercolors can act as a exciting new adventure and a low barrier to entry to anyone who is interested in exploring handmade watercolors and what they can do for their artwork and art practice. I hope in the future to share more about my journey to making handmade watercolors and share more of the watercolors that I've made so far. I hope you enjoy watching me use my handmade watercolors, and if you have a favorite set of handmade watercolors that you love, please let me know. I love exploring handmade watercolors, and if you do have any questions about handmade watercolors, also share them below. I love answering questions about them.
Saw you paint a picture of a face, a face that wasn't even close to mine. I know I shouldn't be in love, but it's so hard to move on. You haven't changed, you stayed the same. But if you did, I'd still love you anyway. I'd give you the world like I promised I would, even though you wouldn't do the same. give you the world like I promised I would. Even though you wouldn't do the same. Had this conversation more than 10 times. After 9, I still wish you were mine. Haven't ate in 7 days, 'cause I've been up till 6 a.m. Wrote 5 songs all just for you. 3 of them I can't bear listening to. I'd give you the world like I promised I would. Even though you wouldn't do the same. I'd give you the world like I promised I would. Even though you wouldn't do the same. I'd do anything you want me to. 'Cause I love you.
I thought it would only be fair to share how I use my watercolors by doing a piece that I normally would do in my sketchbook, which is watercolor and gouache mixed media painting. I use my watercolors as an extension to either a gouache painting, or I use my gouache as an extension to my watercolor painting. One thing I've noticed with a lot of my favorite painters and artists is that they use watercolor, or they'll use gouache and they will use like color pencils to give them sharp details or add line work. And I tend to not do that. I use either my gouache or my watercolors to give me that deep saturation, the line work that I'm looking for. I look to my gouache or my watercolors to be able to mix deep, dark, saturated blacks, and that's because I don't like to have a pure black in my watercolor or gouache palette. I like to mix my own. By mixing my own, I'm able to show depth in the color black, because black is just not black. It's blue, it's green, it's brown sometimes, it has red undertones. So I like to mix my own black, and I use my handmade watercolors to do that. Like for this example of the teacup and saucer, I mix the 3 colors together to get an almost paint gray-y blue color. So it's not completely black, but it's not completely blue, but it does add a contrasting color to the greens, the yellows, the reds of the painting. At first I was a little worried, but I think it does add a little something extra to the painting, and it also allows me to use every single color in the color palette. A funny little fact is I'm always feel really terrible about mixing red. I don't like to use just red straight out of the tube. I often mix a little yellow in it, or sometimes a little blue, and I oftentimes have a lot of trouble mixing my reds because I never get the saturation that I'm looking for, or like the exact color red I'm looking for. But I do enjoy painting strawberries, and every time I paint them, I find a different way to paint that juicy red color of the strawberries. I think the biggest challenge was painting the little red candy strawberries, because I wasn't sure if I could get the right color red to demonstrate that it's a candy and not one of the strawberries.
I'm sitting right here, this is asleep. Can you make it up here and set my mind at ease? I'm on top of the roof, you've been here before. I just miss you a lot, and I know that I got to let you know. Somebody said you are the last one of your kind. If somebody got to bleed, it would be me 1,000 times. I didn't know you wanted me for all these years. Let's just stay up here. Let's just stay up here.
After using handmade watercolors for almost 3 years, I've become familiar with their unique way of granulating and layering on other types of paint. I like that this set of watercolors helped me paint these squash strawberries. I think they might be the best strawberries I've painted because of the unique way these 3 colors played with the gouache. I would like to try painting landscapes with just these 3 colors because I would like to see if I could pull it off. I've already tried portraits and now this illustration, so it's really almost one more test to go. I would also like to explore making more handmade watercolors for specific needs. So if you have any suggestions or any questions about handmade watercolors, please leave them down below. I would love to chat more about them. Thank you so much for being here and watching this Back to Watercolor episode, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Bye bye, take care.